Welcome to the Volunteer Nation podcast, bringing you practical tips and big ideas on how to build, grow, and scale volunteer talent. I'm your host, Tobi Johnson, and if you rely on volunteers to fuel your charity, cause, membership, or movement, I made this podcast just for you. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Volunteer Nation podcast. I'm your host, Tobi Johnson, and I am pumped, as usual. I always am when I have guests on, where I'm going to interview my friend Ruth Leonard. And I'm going to introduce Ruth in a minute, but I want to call out that this is part of our Impact Lab POV series. We are spotlighting bold ideas and practical strategies from our new Volunteer Pro Impact Lab guest advisors. 6 new instructors who've joined us inside the Impact Lab and are offering really wonderful training for intermediate to advanced practitioners. You can still learn if you're a beginner, and there's lots to share today. But I really hand chose our folks that are guest advisors with us for their special expertise. Each brings something unique to the table. So in each of these episodes of the Impact Lab POV series, we're going to explore a unique point of view and then invite you all to go deeper inside our membership, where our guest advisors are going to be leading hands-on training to help you apply what you learn. So I will be inviting you to join later today or later during this episode. Today's guest advisor is Ruth Leonard. She's an expert in effective volunteer and community engagement and a past podcast episode guest, right, Ruth?
I am, yeah. I'm back.
We've been training together a few times. We've had some fun. So today we're going to dive into how to better offboard volunteers and with care and compassion, and how to keep connections with them after they leave. And I can't wait for you to hear her perspective. For more insights from Ruth, also check out Volunteer Nation episode 122, Rethinking Community Involvement, where Ruth talks about some of the insights from her book. And I'll link to her book as well. I know she's also working on a new book. So yeah, we are. We're trying to work on these books, aren't we? So before we get started, though, if you didn't listen to that episode or haven't had a chance yet, Ruth Leonard is the chair of the UK's Association of Volunteer Managers, and she has held lead volunteering posts in UK-wide charities such as Macmillan Cancer Support and Samaritans. Ruth supports organizations to develop inclusive volunteer engagement strategies, enhancing efficiency and stakeholder satisfaction, and pioneering volunteer involving offers and services. She's the co-author of the book I talked about, Volunteer Involvement, and is a frequent volunteer involvement, and is a frequent public speaker appearing on podcasts and charity conferences and chairing conferences as well. And Ruth is also the head of and president of RBL Consulting. For Ruth, volunteer management is about empowering and enabling people to bring creativity and ingenuity to a solution to make a difference in their community. Having been involved in volunteer management for over 2 decades, she has significant experience at providing leadership on involving and engaging people, and is committed to ensuring others are able to develop those skills. So welcome to the pod, Ruth.
Thank you, Tobi. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Well, I know we've got lots to bring to the table. I know that one of Ruth's key perspectives is really about equity and making sure volunteers are treated as true partners. But before we get into that, I love to talk about people's birth stories when it comes to volunteerism. How did you get into the world of volunteerism to begin with, Ruth?
Probably like lots of people, I fell into it. So when I was a child, I wanted to be a journalist, and I trained in becoming a journalist. I got my national certificate of journalism, but then I couldn't get a job in journalism. So I ended up volunteering in a press team at a large charity. And from there, I got to know what it was like to work with volunteers and the amazing stories that you could get. So I went for a job in that volunteering team at that very charity, and the rest is history. But I discovered that I could do the things involving volunteers that were really important to me from journalism. So telling the stories, advocating, looking at things around social justice, and really being where people were and helping them to amplify what they needed to do. So it was a perfect element. And for that that role in the volunteering team, I was able to grow and develop and learn what it really meant to give power to volunteers and have them take leadership. So with Samaritans, a lot of that happened, and I just wanted to be part of helping people make that difference, and then helping those who worked with them to know how they could be doing that and building the relationships.
Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about why you think volunteerism in today's world in particular is so important.
I think volunteering is and has always been important. It's one of the real ways of having people make that difference. It's a true way of showing democracy, of being able to see a need in your local community or the global community or universe if you're a climate change activist, and to start to do something and make a difference. There's a quote from Margaret Mead that talks about the power of committed individuals making that change, and that's the only thing that ever has done. And I think that's something that we need more and more. And the whole element of relationships, I think volunteer involvement is about building relationships and enabling relationships between others. And in this increasingly divided world, I think that's really important, to be able to hear from and meet people who are different from you and share those ideas to make the world a better place.
Yeah, absolutely. Could not agree more. I mean, even now saw a statistic recently that in the US at least 33%, about one third of the entire nonprofit workforce is unpaid volunteers. Like imagine if one third of the services went away tomorrow.
Mhm.
It's so essential. So there's that, helping hands piece of it, the talent, the community talent that's being leveraged. I think you're right also that there is this connection building aspect as well. And volunteerism benefits the volunteer, the organization, the people who are impacted by that organization, the community at large, sort of the culture of the community is really knit together through volunteers,
Yeah.
because otherwise folks wouldn't, aside from transactional relationships, they wouldn't come into contact with each other
Yeah.
except, in the store or at school, or there's not a lot of spaces for community members to come together and just like learn about one another as they're working side by side.
And I've been doing some thinking recently about values and how volunteering can
Mm.
really give action to your own internal values in a way that other being a part of society, including working, might not be able to do. You can really bring them to life, the things that you inherently care about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point too. So, we're going to talk about volunteer offboarding, and I think it's a topic that doesn't get enough attention. I
Hmm.
think we do so much work on recruitment and
Completely.
onboarding, and when it comes time for the fond farewell, it gets very, usually it's just abrupt. Like a volunteer says, "Well, I'm out. I'm done." Whether it's a positive leaving or and maybe they're retiring from volunteering, maybe they're not. Maybe it's a planned exit or
Hmm.
not a planned exit. But I feel like we don't do enough around volunteer offboarding. So let's start with, what's a belief or value you hold about volunteer offboarding that you think most people in the field might tend to get wrong?
I think it's as you described it. We concentrate so much on bringing people in, and numbers are important, so that we bring more and more people in, that we actually don't consciously and intentionally think about that ending. It's that I think we have that feeling that because a relationship has ended, that means that there's been a problem and we've done something wrong to cause it. And we spend a lot of time avoiding trying to make that. But if we do think about volunteer involvement as a relationship, they all have these ebbs and flows, and it's always an opportunity to be able to recognize when something has run its course or something can pause. So I would encourage people to think, rather than how do I avoid this at all costs, think about being upfront about it and talking at the beginning. You don't have to stay here forevermore. You stay here as long as you can and do what you want to do. And there's always a way to be out. So I think you were talking about recruitment. We always think about that as a sexy big part of the relationship, but actually thinking about keeping and then giving permission for people to leave is probably so much more important, because that's what really creates that sense of purpose and belonging, and can give a positive experience to the volunteers, which they can then go on and tell to other volunteers about. So ironically, it becomes a recruitment tool.
Absolutely. I mean, I think in some respects, if you make offboarding transparent, at the beginning,
Yes.
it also gives people a sense of trust. Look, I'm not signing my life away. There is a finite amount that I can give to this organization. They understand that.
Yes.
They want to make the most of this relationship. So do I. And, like I had a really good friend of mine, Robert, who used to be, I used to do a fitness boot camp, and I get up at like 5 o'clock every morning and like do this like awesome boot camp. And he used to say, look, some people are in it in your life for a reason or a season. And, we
Nice.
have to accept that, and there's also other ways to continue a
Yep.
relationship. Even, you have friends you see all the time, and then for a while you don't see them. They might come back, or they've moved on. It's a respectful way, I think, of working. When you've thought about volunteer offboarding, was there a time or was there something that changed your mind over the past few decades when you thought about it? Was there a point in time where you thought, well, this is more than I thought it was?
Yeah, I was one of those people who used to think I was failing if volunteers wanted to leave. You wanted to leave me. I didn't keep the project going well enough. I wasn't giving you enough interesting things to do. But I think it was during that recognition that actually I was having a relationship with you and we were building those conversations, and I was really understanding what you might want. That was at Samaritans. I think that really came true, was being able to understand people. I love that people stay for a reason or season idea. There is an opportunity to work with people, to let them go and honour the legacy, and then to think about, as you've also pointed out, how we could be involving them in different ways that isn't volunteering, and how we can make the door open. So I think it was, whilst I was at Samaritans, building those relationships, which was a completely volunteer-led organisation, and recognising it's fine, it's not me, it's not that we're doing anything wrong, it's just, it's right for the volunteer. And it is about recognising the volunteers as people, as individuals, as having agency in this genuine relationship and partnership, and not about just trying to keep people nailed down. That changed my mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Why do you think it's important to focus on volunteer offboarding? There's so many things that leaders of volunteers could focus on right now.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think this is so important, especially right now?
Yeah. I think when we ignore endings and we don't give that proper chance to celebrate, to thank, to recognize the value that people are bringing at the end of that relationship, then we're not giving true support or recognition to those volunteers, or also volunteers coming behind them and being there as well. It's really important to be able to say thank you, not just to cast somebody off as if it was a transactional relationship, that actually you did matter and what you did here really, really matters. And I think in this increasingly feels like a throwaway world, I think this whole value of volunteering needs to be definitely recognized for what it is. And we really say thank you so much for what you've done, and help people to feel that they can be engaged either with the organization that we're working for, or with is it another way of volunteering across the community.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely agree. It's like, what memories do you want? We remember beginnings and endings. Human beings
So
will
true.
pay more. They've done research on webinars, and people are more attuned at the beginning of the webinar and at the end of the webinar. So if you're a trainer, you always know, like, you want to say important stuff at the beginning, you want to say important stuff at the end. And of course, people are paying attention, but human beings really pay a lot of attention to first impressions and how they leave something. And, when we think about volunteer offboarding, what do we want people to remember about their volunteer experience?
Yeah, they want to be. They want to come
10
back. They
years
want to
from now,
recommend people to come back. They want to be thinking about, that was a
Yeah.
lovely time I had.
And even like 5-10 years from now, what kind of memory do you want to be in someone's memory bank? Right?
Yeah.
Do you want to feel like, and someone who could have had a really wonderful volunteering experience, and if their offboarding is horrible, holla, they're not going to remember the good stuff,
No.
right? They're going to remember like, wow, this was really awful. I felt like I was just like, I was dropped off the dump truck, or just like, don't let the door hit you in the butt on the way out. You know what I mean?
And that's after a long time of giving time and really enjoying it. To have that as your final memory, such
Yeah.
a waste.
Yeah, such a waste. What have you seen any horror stories, or just in your own experience, what happens when leaders of volunteers don't approach volunteer offboarding in the right way? What are the, the opportunity costs? You talked a little bit about transitioning to other roles or other relationships with the organization, but what are kind of the broad range of things of opportunity cost if this isn't done right?
Yeah, so these people are already a warm audience because they're already committed to your organization or to your cause. So if you just let that person go, it's so much harder to recruit somebody who's completely cold to any of the other roles that you've got. So obviously fundraising and giving donations are really important to organizations, but really having that knowledge of what it's been like as a volunteer can just start informing what the future of the organization or the course or the project might be. So you're losing knowledge and history, you're losing that sense of where the gaps might be that you might want to fill in different ways. And you're losing potential funders and really committed people who will speak warmly about you in their community if you want to start raising money. So just cutting people off means that you haven't got that anymore. Just sending or not even getting around to say thank you for going, because you're not even sending that reminder. You're just taking somebody off a database and all of a sudden they're gone. And they've given time to you and they're now not part of that anymore. You've lost such a huge resource.
Yeah. Yeah. And not being purposeful, you just nailed it on the head of losing that, intellectual capital, not only the social capital of, you have ambassadors, you when people leave, they're still going to talk about you.
Yeah.
If
Good or
your
bad.
charity comes up in conversation, they're going to say, oh yeah, I used to volunteer there. Right. But you're also losing their skill set and knowledge of the role that they were working in. And if you don't do it purposefully, all of the wisdom that they built up in that role, if you're not transitioning that knowledge, you're not helping someone else onboard into that role, or you're not creating SOPs or guidelines or checklists, or you're not, doing an exit interview, you're losing all of that really amazing knowledge. Because volunteers often, in my experience, the roles that they were working in, they knew more about the roles than I did. I didn't work in that role.
Yeah.
Even though I was training them on that role, right? I didn't know all the tips and tricks of the role because I wasn't in it every day.
That's so true. Yeah, and they know where the gaps are. And like you say, they know where the workarounds are to actually make it happen. And they know the connections.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, let's take a quick break after this chat with Ruth on how to do volunteer onboarding well. We're going to talk a little bit more on what people can do, what practical tips people can take away, and what actions you can take. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Hey, everybody. Have you subscribed to our Pro News weekly resource email yet? If not, why not? Each week you get a helpful article, a research insight, our latest podcast episode, and one practical tip you can use right away. Plus, when you subscribe, I'll send you a few helpful resources via email to take action and get some wins right away. So join 9,500 other leaders just like you who are upgrading their practices and making an even bigger impact. Visit volpro.net/newsletter-subscription. That's volpro.net/newsletter-subscription. And I hope to see you on the inside. Okay, we're back with our discussion with Ruth Leonard on how we can do volunteer offboarding a little more purposefully. So, Ruth, let's get into a little bit of practical steps people can take away. So we've talked about your thinking around volunteer offboarding with care and compassion. Can you share an example from your work with a client or in your own work where a slight change led to a significant impact?
I think it is about making sure you have that opportunity to have an exit interview, even if it's a survey, even if you don't have that chance to talk to people, just to hear one thing that went well and one thing that you'd like to change can really inform how you might develop the volunteering opportunity that you've got so that people feel committed. But building on that, yes, it doesn't matter if you just send a survey, but actually taking that time to have a conversation means that you hear more truths, more elements of what people are genuinely feeling, and they're speaking to you as a human being so that they can say things that they might not otherwise say. You don't just get a generic brush off of, I'm leaving because I've got too much other things on. It could be, I really did love it, but this was happening, and you get that better sense. So you just, as a volunteer manager running your program, learn so much more from that conversation. So I do think, if at all possible, try to speak to speak to somebody and really hear what that is. And it could be a role for a volunteer to speak to other volunteers. It doesn't have to be you yourself if you've got a huge amount of people, but that actual human conversation can feel really valuable to the volunteer themselves, but bring you a lot of things that is going to be important.
Yeah, I think too, if you include it in your orientation that, hey, because I'll hear folks say that, well, nobody ever answers our surveys, our exit surveys, or I try to reach out to people for an exit interview and nobody gets back to me. And I feel like you haven't set them up for this, right? If you include it as part of your onboarding, where you're saying, here's the life cycle of a volunteer, or here's your journey. Here's what you can expect. At the very end, we really do want to talk to you about your experience. It's how we continuously improve. It's how we make a bigger impact. And whatever knowledge you have gained throughout your experience with us, we would love to know it. And here, by the way, are some of the things we've changed as a result of what volunteers have told us in the past.
Yeah, that's what I was going to add, Toby. It is that you've got to be able to show the volunteers that you have listened and you have made things happen. So that's a really key bit.
So then they're like, if I say something, now, and I obviously also like, hey, our doors are open. We'd rather not hear about it at the very end. If you have a suggestion for improvement, we will be surveying you throughout your experience, whatever the thing is. But I think if we normalize it as part of and, I think we're also human beings. I learned this from one of my an executive director I worked for at a nonprofit. And she talked a lot. She said, I have a big belief in rituals. There's so many different rituals that bond us, right? Rituals are things that what makes it a ritual is it happens as a normal course of whatever we're involved in. Rituals also are something that everybody knows how it works, right? It's not a mystery, right? If you're part of a group, you belong to a group, you know what happens during that ritual, whatever it is. It might be awarding people a name tag. It might be, whatever it is, clapping people out at the end of a shift, whatever it is, it can be a small or big ritual, but your offboarding could be part of your rituals and everybody knows what it is, knows how it happens, knows when it happens. And because you belong to this group, you are invited to be part of this ritual. And I think if we treat it that way, it becomes part of, just normal course of operations, not a special ask at the very end.
Yeah, that's so true.
So if folks, for someone who feels like they need to improve in their volunteer offboarding, let's say it's very random right now, or they're feeling heartbroken and taking it personal every single time a volunteer leaves. And again, people in your life for a reason or season, it's okay to give them the gift of goodbye. Sometimes we give people the gift of goodbye because they're a lot of trouble, but that's not usually the way. Right? But where should people begin? What's your best advice for folks if they feel like they're not doing this well or not doing it at all?
You mentioned it earlier, but I think the important thing is to think about, how do I want the volunteer to feel at the end of this? How do I want them to be looking back? And I'll actually pick up on, yes, sometimes volunteers leave because you want them to leave because something has gone wrong. But even so, we want to create a sign of dignity to give them that opportunity to recognize that they have still done something, and we want to reflect and respect that. I think some of the things that get in the way are people trying to avoid it because people don't like that conflict, and we have those assumptions that if someone's leaving, that it means failure. So it's about thinking, rethinking, rephrasing. What does it mean to have an end? What does it mean to have somebody choosing to have given us their time and now leaving, and how can I help them feel the way that they want to feel? So it's that general picking up on that relationship that you've got with that person, and really, really having that care, making sure you're giving that chance to honor what they've done and how they've been there. So just reframing it, and what you were saying earlier about creating that legacy, having that sense of this is a part of the celebration pattern. So the key thing is not to fear it, but to welcome it. And I think that stretches across the whole of the volunteer journey. So starting up front, recognizing that this is going to come to an end at some point, and you're going to put things in place to really approach that with a kind curiosity element about it.
Yeah. What about keeping people on your mailing list? You talked about okay, they're out of your system, or they're inactive on your VMS. It's so horrible. You've been deleted. You've become inactive, like what? It's like human beings.
Yeah.
What about keeping people on
Yeah.
as other types of supporters or inviting people back?
Yes.
How do you navigate that transition? I know a lot of people are like, look, volunteers have given enough. We're not asking for any money after the fact. I'm like, are you kidding me? You're not offering people the opportunity to decide for themselves whether they want to continue to support you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really important as part of that whole offboarding process to think about how do we still stay in touch with you? And it might not be a crude marketing. It could be, Tobi, we want to let you know what's going on. You've given so much time. How can we stay in touch with you? So it's having a regular specific newsletter potentially for people who have stopped volunteering. One organisation that I was working for created an alumni scheme, which was for people who had been volunteers, and they were able to think about what they did more, how they heard things, and it's just that element of being respected for the knowledge that you brought and the history that you have, and it just gives people a sense of kudos. So when you do want to come back, or you want to recommend a family or friend to volunteer somewhere, you've already got a warm place that you want to get to, and you know what the offers are so that you can talk about them more knowledgeably when you're out in your community. So yes, having that whole step in the journey of still staying in touch afterwards, I think is important. And that's something that we don't often think about because it feels like it's time consuming, but gets easier with a modern technology.
Yeah, no kidding. You can just say, do you want to stay on our mailing list? We'd love to keep in touch and
Mm.
let you know what's up. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what we talked about mindset shift of really allowing for ends to happen,
Mm-hmm.
not taking it personally, etc. Is there anything else you can think of that gets in the way of people doing this well? What are the biggest sort of hurdles that people need to be proactive about and be prepared for?
I think there is that whole element of how organizations are encouraging us to think about numbers and retention as opposed to humans and building relationships. So there's something there in our mindset. And my book talks a lot about that building of relationship and rather than just counting people. So there's things there, and thinking about how we can really make sure that people are feeling part of that community longer term. They're part of your organization or your cause. They're there because they're committed. So let's think about how we can see them as that person who is part of this ongoing community, not somebody who's leaving it. I think some of those mindset changes and what can we do to really keep you included, just as we would when you were here actively giving X amount of hours a week or a month. We want to make sure you still feel part of it.
Yeah.
Relationship thinking, I think, is where we want to come down to
Yeah,
it.
it's almost that, people are part of a larger community and it's not where it's surrounded by a moat and you're either in or you're out. That's really not how community and human
No.
experience happens. It's more like you're either closer to the middle or further away from the middle. And those types of relationships change not only at the end of volunteering, but throughout a
Mm-hmm.
volunteer's life cycle. There's some times where folks are really busy and they pull back and then they approach more when they have more time or when they have more bandwidth. So I think too, when we think of like either you're in or you're out, it's not really how human relationships work.
No.
Yeah. So, well, this has been a great conversation, Ruth. Thanks for jumping on and joining us for our POV series with our Impact Lab guest advisors. In your upcoming Impact Lab seminar, Saying Goodbye, How to Help Volunteers Leave Well and Stay Connected, it'll happen on June 10th, folks. So if you want to get in on this training, you want to join the community. And if you are listening to this after the fact, there's already a replay recording there waiting for you inside the community. But Ruth, what will you help people do differently and who would benefit most from
Mm-hmm.
joining your training on this?
So the training's been designed to really help individuals reframe what ending is, to start practicing some of that self-compassionate language as much as giving that dignity to the volunteers and create dignified transitions. And then help to design ways, we talked about it already, help to design ways for volunteers to stay involved with the community and the organisation afterwards if they choose to. I think the session's going to be for anybody who wants to strengthen their volunteering culture. So that could be the whole of the journey within their volunteering. So people who manage volunteers, who are coordinators, other volunteers, and also an element of people who really feel challenged by how to say goodbye in general.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Well, this has been a great conversation. I think it's a good reminder of something that is often just not considered at all and obviously not done as well, I think, as we could. So I'm really excited to share this info with you all as an audience and just to think about, is your onboarding really giving people a sense of continued connection? Not that people are obligated. I think there's a difference between connection and obligation. People aren't obligated to give financially. People aren't obligated to come back and volunteer. People aren't even obligated to sing your praises in the community, but they can still feel connected and have a warm feeling about the contribution that they made, big or small. I mean, I think also thinking about offboarding for a one-off volunteer opportunity, that is as important.
Yeah,
you know,
it's not about hours or weeks or months or anything like that. It is about you've given some time. You've considered giving some time. You've given us some time, and what you've done has made an impact, and we want to stay involved with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't say it better. So, Ruth, this has been fun. As always, we always have fun chatting. One last question before we wrap up. What are you most excited about in the year ahead?
Well, you mentioned the second book, so I'm excited about actually getting that finished and getting that out. I think there's lots of things that I've been thinking about with the world as it is and where volunteering sits within that. It does feel as though the sector is getting more comfortable with thinking about volunteering as relationships and values driven. So I'm really excited about seeing how that happened and moving away from some of the transactional formal volunteering roles and really embracing that community-led spirit seems to be happening. So that's those are the things that I'm really excited about. And I'm excited about reading your book, Tobi.
Ruth is calling me out right now. Seriously, later this month I'm editing. I swear to God. So yeah, this has been good. I'll have you back on, and then maybe we can have a time when both of our books are published, and we can do like a back and forth. That would be fun.
Definitely.
Yeah, let's do that. That's putting more pressure on. No, we're going to get these done. One other thing I wanted to mention, I have the link. I'll put the link in the show notes for Ruth's previous discussion, her previous book as well. But if you want more on coaching volunteers before they leave and even preventing them from leaving, because there's a flip side to this. It's yes, and yes, we don't want to keep people staying when they don't want to stay. But there are times when they leave for reasons that they shouldn't be leaving. So a poor experience, for example. So check out Volunteer Nation episode 140, Volunteer Performance Issues, how to finally have that chat and maybe reverse something that's going on that can end up being a positive for both the volunteer and you as an organization. So check that out. I'll post a link to that in the show notes as well. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Ruth, for giving us this incredibly insightful idea to just pose to folks to really consider. If you're ready to go beyond ideas and start building a modern, sustainable volunteer strategy, I really invite you to join the Volunteer Pro Impact Lab. Ruth is one of 6 amazing guest advisors that are teaching this year. We've got so much to cover, and she will be, again, leading a deeper hands-on seminar on how to do volunteer on offboarding well. And if you're interested in some of the other guest advisors, we're doing our whole POV series to help you get in touch with and learn more from our esteemed instructor pool. And I want to thank you all for continuing to listen to the Volunteer Nation podcast. We will be here next week, same time, same place. See you then. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Volunteer Nation podcast. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review so that we can reach more people like you who want to improve the impact of their good cause. For more tips and notes from the show, check us out at tobijohnson.com. We'll see you next week for another installment of Volunteer Nation.